Orlando, Florida is one place that can easily be described as the theme park capital of the world, as you have Disney World with 4 theme parks, and then Universal with 2 theme parks, with a third one almost finished, and then you have a Seaworld park, and then an hour away you have Busch Gardens, as well as a whole bunch of extra mini parks scattered around Orlando. Now, to anyone visiting the area to try out these theme parks, or even to just people around the area, it can be pretty overwhelming to know everything that's going on. So I want to give sort of a local's guide to the whole theme park scene in Orlando. This is coming from somebody who has a pass to everything, and I go to a park basically every day. So first off, let's just take a look at an overview of the map of Orlando. Now what's pretty crazy is that all of these parks are in like one section of the city. They're all in the southwestern part of Orlando. So you don't even have to drive very far to get to each one. So over here on the east side, we have the airport. And if you just drive 20 minutes west, right here you have Universal and their 2 parks. And then just a few miles south of that, you have SeaWorld. And in between both of these is a strip called International Drive, which is another interesting place that we'll get to. But then if you keep following the freeway south, you'll find Disney World, which takes up a huge plot of land. Now, lucky for me, I moved into a spot right in between all of the theme parks so that I can drive to any one of these in less than 20 minutes. And so I have a lot of experience with each park. So I'm going to go through each one by one and just kind of talk about the pros and cons of each park. Everyone asks me what my favorite park is, and to be honest, I cannot rank them at all. Like, I've had good and bad days at all of them. But let's start over here with Universal. So when you first show up to Universal, you feel like you're entering an airport because you come in through these gigantic parking garages, and then there's all these moving walkways, and then this huge security checkpoint. I mean, it really feels like you're walking through airport security, except that they're actually good at what they do. But then as you come walking through City Walk, it just feels like this big grand entrance. Like, as you're walking in for the first time, it really sends a message that like, wow, this place is a big deal. Anyway, Universal Studios is kind of an interesting park because as a baseline, it's kind of a boring place, to be honest. Like, most of the rides in this park are just screen-based simulator rides. Now you have Diagon Alley, the whole Harry Potter area, and that spot is really cool. That's definitely the highlight of the park. But so many of the rides in this park are just kind of like, you'll do them once and then you never need to do them again. Stuff like Fast and the Furious, or the Simpsons ride, or Jimmy Fallon. But some of the rides are still pretty decent, like the Mummy is great, and I know everyone hates on Rip Ride Rocket, but I still love that ride. I'm really sad that it's going away. But the reason I say that Universal Studios is kind of a boring park is because it's basically intentionally made half empty so that it can be filled with holiday stuff. Because this is where they hold the events for Halloween Horror Nights, or their Christmas celebration, or they're just now starting Mardi Gras. And so this park almost works as like just an event venue. But like sometimes when I show up to Universal Studios when there's no events going on, I'm just looking around and thinking like, what is everybody doing here? I know that's a bit of a spoiled local thing to say because there are still some good things to explore and some fun rides, but the park can definitely feel incomplete when it doesn't have the extra bonus events going on. But a lot of people feel the same way about EPCOT when they're not doing some kind of festival at the time. But yeah, during holidays and special events, this park can actually be pretty cool. Like, I just went to opening night of Mardi Gras, which is the first time I've ever done that, and it actually surprised me just like how hyped everybody gets. It's pretty cool on nights like that because you just have everyone who wants to show up, especially like all of the other park YouTubers. Like, pretty much anyone who's into the park scene in Orlando is going to show up on an opening night. But then let's move next door to Islands of Adventure, which is the complete opposite because this park doesn't change hardly at all throughout the year. It is pretty consistent throughout the whole year. There's very little holiday stuff that changes. This is where Hagrid's coaster is, and Velocicoaster, and the Hulk coaster. And I mean, overall, I would say Islands of Adventure is a really good, well-rounded park. I mean, the theming is pretty good. Their big roller coasters are really good. One of my biggest issues with Islands of Adventure is that there seems to be a lot of dead space in the park right now. Like, you got half of Toon Lagoon over here that just doesn't have much going on. There's a big empty stadium. And then on the other side of the park, there's the whole Lost Continent, which used to have one attraction, but now that's shut down. So it's just another big empty spot. And so I feel like they are probably going to be renovating this park quite a bit after Epic opens. Most of the time when I show up to Universal, I'll walk in, do Hulk, then do Velocicoaster. Then I'll see if Hagrid's single rider line is open. And if not, go over to the studio side, do Rip Ride Rocket, maybe Mummy, and then head home. But then right outside these 2 parks, you have City Walk, which is honestly a pretty cool place on its own. I mean, it's basically just a restaurant district, but when you show up to this place at night, you feel like you're really in a party. I feel like the biggest difference between Universal and Disney is that Universal tries to be more like a nightlife kind of place where adults can go and have fun and stay up late. At least I'd like to say that, but it seems like they close their parks pretty early on a regular basis. Whereas Disney is more of like a family-friendly place where you can go and escape and be in some kind of fairy tale. So they aren't always directly competing over the same audience. Anyways, once you leave the Universal bubble and you head south a little bit, that's where you'll find International Drive, which I like to refer to as the Orlando Strip. I'm pretty sure there's like 100 different hotels and restaurants and tourist traps. And I mean, when you're driving around there during the day, it kind of just feels like a cheap place full of a bunch of rundown knockoff gift shops. But if you ever try driving down here like on a Saturday night at like 10 p.m., it is gridlocked. Like, there are so many people in there going to the restaurants, and this place just turns into a party. There's even a couple of mini theme parks on International Drive. One of them is known as Icon Park, which has a giant, like 400-foot tall swing and a Ferris wheel and a slingshot, which can basically be seen from anywhere in the city. In fact, I can see them from my apartment building. But yeah, International Drive is great if you're looking for a cheap hotel and you don't need to stay on site for Universal or SeaWorld or Disney. And then just east of International Drive is where Epic Universe is going. And a lot of people have asked me what I think about Epic Universe. I think it looks really cool, but I don't think it's going to be a big part of my life for a while because they're not going to be opening annual passes for at least the rest of this year. So I'll probably go 3 or 4 times before the end of the year, but it's not going to be part of my routine until they add an annual pass for it. But heading south down International Drive, we have SeaWorld. Now, I feel like when most people hear the name SeaWorld, they're usually just picturing the 90s version of SeaWorld, where it's just a dolphin show and an orca show, and then maybe some aquariums. And so when I tell people I've been to SeaWorld like 40 times in the last few months, they're like, what? Why? What would you do there? But SeaWorld's actually really been upping their game on roller coasters. I guess they realized that Universal and Disney are much more focused on theming, and so SeaWorld is like, well, we can build some big roller coasters, and they're relatively not as expensive. And so they've kind of just been turning their park into a roller coaster park with some aquariums. I guess they're trying to phase out the whole orca show thing to try and fix their reputation. And all of SeaWorld's roller coasters are actually pretty decent. In fact, Mako is easily my most ridden roller coaster in Florida. I could ride that thing all day. But something I really like about SeaWorld is that it's got a much more laid-back feel. Like when you try to roll up to Universal or Disney, you're usually pulling into this gigantic parking structure, and you've got to walk so far to get into the parks, and then there's just huge crowds every day of the year, and it feels like there's just no slow season to any of those parks. But SeaWorld, if you go on like a school day, it is pretty much dead. But if you go on a weekend, it's packed. So I think SeaWorld is much more of like a locals-friendly park. And I love showing up in the evenings, maybe like 2 hours before close. It's really quick. I can drive there in 5 minutes. I can do all the roller coasters, and then I just drive right back home. It's as simple as driving to the grocery store for me. But some things I've noticed about SeaWorld is that they can be really good at some things and then really bad at other things. Like their whole Christmas event thing was amazing. I thought it was super high quality, but their Halloween one was not as good. We'll put it that way. They're really good at putting in some really nice roller coasters, but their employees don't seem so motivated to work very quick, depending on the day. You can kind of tell that Universal and Disney have a much higher standard for how enthusiastic their employees have to behave at all times. Another thing SeaWorld always surprises me with is their fireworks shows. I mean, they have a bunch of different fireworks shows depending on the season, and I have never seen a fireworks show at SeaWorld that I didn't like. In fact, their summer show might be my favorite fireworks show anywhere. I know the Disney people will hate me for saying that, but I think SeaWorld does the best fireworks shows. Even though, yes, they are much lower budget. Universal's fireworks shows are sad. Like, they just do not have the space to do any big ones, but I think Epic is planning on doing bigger fireworks when they open. But now it's time to move south down I-4 to the big one and talk about Disney World. Now, I'm just going to be going over the 4 theme parks here, and I guess we'll start with Animal Kingdom. Now, Animal Kingdom's an interesting one because the park opens really early, but it also closes really early in the evening. I mean, it's usually closed by about 6 p.m., maybe 7. And so most tourists will go to this park early in the morning, meaning they're going to leave pretty early in the afternoon. So when I show up at like 4 o'clock, it's like everyone is leaving, and I can just walk on to pretty much anything. Now, a lot of people would call Animal Kingdom like a half-day park, which is kind of understandable. It kind of feels like there's not a whole lot going on, and that's one of the reasons most people leave before the evening. But most of my visits to Animal Kingdom just consist of doing Dinosaur once, and then getting on Expedition Everest, single rider line, and then just riding it, 5 or 6 times in a row until I get sick and then just go home. I do like to walk around and look at the animals, but they usually close that so early that it's usually closed by the time I get there. But Animal Kingdom does have some pretty good vibes. Like, just walking around the park is really cool. Like, probably some of the best nature theming anywhere. If you go over to the Pandora area, they've got 2 rides, and I feel like both of them are pretty overrated. You got Avatar Flight of Passage, which I would just rename to Soarin' Over Pandora, and then you've got Navi River Journey, which I would just call It's a Big World. But they will both consistently have about an hour wait all the time. I've just been lucky to catch it at like 10 or 15 minutes a couple times, and that's the only time I'll ride them. But let's move over to Disney's Hollywood Studios. Now, Hollywood Studios might be my least favorite looking park. I guess I'm just not a big fan of the whole studio set theming. I mean, I feel the same way about Universal Studios too, but over in Hollywood Studios, we've got the whole Star Wars land. I mean, Rise of the Resistance is one of the most jaw-dropping dark rides ever. It's one of the very few dark rides that I'll like keep riding over and over again, just because I'm amazed amazed at how insane it is. But usually when I go into this park, I'll just do Rise of the Resistance, Tower of Terror, Rock and Roller Coaster, and then call it good. I mean, Tower and Rock and Roller Coaster are both amazing rides on their own, but other than that, this park kind of feels like it just has a lot of empty space, or at least just things that I'd skip over. I don't know, I have been taking a bit of a closer look lately, and it seems like there's a lot of hidden little restaurants all over that look pretty cool, but I rarely go to restaurants while I'm in theme parks, so I'm not the best at reviewing that stuff. Moving over to EPCOT, I mean, sometimes I struggle to even call it a theme park, because it feels like it's half museum, half shopping mall. So the first time I ever went to EPCOT, I thought, wow, this place is so big, there's so much to explore, I'll never see everything there is to see here. And then by the third time I was there, I was like, yeah, okay, I kind of seen it all by now. So like the whole north end of the park is like a bunch of exhibits for like nature and space. Most of the rides are just like you sitting in a seat, moving very slowly, just looking at presentations the whole time. But this park also has probably the greatest ride ever built, and that would be Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, which I'm blown away that I'm even saying that because I've never cared about Marvel or Guardians, but that ride is just on another level. There have actually been quite a few days where I'll be sitting at home, I'll wake up at 7 a.m., I'll join the virtual queue, and then whenever they call me to go get on the ride, I'll just go outside, get in the car, drive to Epcot, ride the ride once, turn around and come back home. But yeah, this is where you also have the whole World Showcase where you go from country to country, and there's just different shops and restaurants and little food stands, and it can be really fun to just go explore. And they also do a really cool fireworks show every night at 9 o'clock, which, looking at the clock, I think I'm hearing it right now, actually. I'd say Epcot is probably the most popular Disney park among locals, because it's a park that's pretty easy to get to. It's open till 9 p.m., and people just show up to go drink and watch fireworks. And so I think a lot of people, as they get off work, they just go hang out at Epcot as like a local bar. But now we move to the king of all theme parks, the most visited theme park in the entire world, and that is Disney's Magic Kingdom. Now, when I went to Magic Kingdom for the first time, I really went in wondering, like, how is this the most popular theme park? Let's see what all the hype is about. And this is not a park that you can just casually pop into. I mean, first of all, it's in the very back of Disney World, so you gotta drive the farthest, and then you have to park in the biggest parking lot in the world, and then hop on a tram to take you just to the front of the parking lot, where then you get onto a monorail and take that to the front of the park. So getting to Magic Kingdom usually takes about 20 minutes longer than it takes to get anywhere else. But this really is the park of Disney parks. I know some people say Disneyland is better, and honestly, it's been so long since I've been to Disneyland that I can't really compare them. But Magic Kingdom honestly feels like the only fully completed park in Florida, where there's no dead space or just like closed down or run down rides. At least I would have said that a couple months ago before they started ripping up Frontierland. But this is where you got all the classics, like the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, the Haunted Mansion, and Space Mountain, and It's a Small World. And so it's just a very cute park, I guess you could say. It's so well maintained and groomed. Like everything is just pristine. It all looks so pretty. All the landscaping is perfect. All of the pathways are just super clean. That is, if you can see the pathways, because there's usually about 50,000 people there. And then Magic Kingdom also does the biggest fireworks show out of any of them. Their big happily ever after, like 20-minute fireworks show that they do every night of the year. Honestly, I'm pretty sure I've seen that fireworks show from every angle of the park except right in front of the castle, because that's where everyone else is, and you do not want to be in the middle of that crowd. And you also don't want to be leaving the park right after the fireworks end, because it is about as packed as it can be. And remember, you got to get back on the monorail to get back to the parking lot. And so you just get this gigantic horde of people all flooding over to the monorail line, which, little pro tip, if you go over to the resort's monorail, it's usually a much shorter line. Yes, it does make one quick stop, but it doesn't really add to how much time it takes. Anyways, most of the time I go to Magic Kingdom these days, I mostly just hang out in Tomorrowland, because People Mover's always really quick to get on, and that's just a fun, relaxing ride to cruise around. And then Space Mountain grows on me every time I get on it. I didn't even like it the very first time I did it, but it's now one of my favorites. And then of course Tron is like one of the coolest looking rides in the whole park. It's still not quite as good as Cosmic Rewind, but it's pretty close. I honestly find it a little annoying just how overhyped Magic Kingdom is, though. It seems like there's a lot of people who go to this park who are more interested in being able to say that they were there than actually doing anything there. I mean, I don't know, I just think it's a little silly that so many people see it as like a status symbol when you enter this park. But now let's finish off with a bonus park and talk about Busch Gardens Tampa. Now it takes about an hour, maybe an hour and a half to get to Busch Gardens, but it can be worth a trip if you do it right. Now Busch Gardens, I would say, has probably the best coaster collection of anywhere in Florida, especially with Iron Gwazi and Cheetah Hunt and Shikra and Kumba and Montu. Like, they just have a whole bunch of really big ones. Like, SeaWorld has been catching up, but it's still not quite as good as as Busch Gardens for their ride collection. And then they've got a whole bunch of animal exhibits, so it's basically half zoo, half roller coaster park. And so the park does look pretty nice and has some really good rides. But that's where the good side ends, because while I would say that they put a lot of effort into building a really nice park, I feel like they kind of ran out of money on running the park afterwards. The place always feels severely understaffed. Like, if you go on a school day, the park is completely empty, so it's not that big of a deal. You can still just walk on to basically anything. But if you try going on a busy day or like a weekend, this park is not fun at all. The ride ops are really slow. They're usually not running enough trains, so the lines are just barely moving. You try and get food, and those lines are horrible too. The food is really expensive, and it's not very good either. So yeah, I would definitely recommend going to Busch Gardens on a school day. But at least they have their Halloween event pretty well figured out. They still do quite a bit better than SeaWorld. But anyways, that's kind of my overview of the Orlando theme park scene. Like I said, I can't really pick a favorite park or a least favorite park. They all have really cool things about them and some compromises to them. So I can't really say that there's any one perfect park that is just my go-to. I guess SeaWorld's kind of the one I go to the most, just because it's the closest and the easiest to get into if I'm just looking for something quick. But there's just some of my thoughts and reviews and tips on some of these parks. Let me know if you guys want to disagree or add something to this, and I'll see you next time.